There were 4 raids in Montreal, 1 in Quebec City, 25 people arrested. Police say marijuana was being sold to people who had no legal right to buy it. One of the clubs has been around for about 10 years and has some 1,500 members. CTV's Geneviève Boschman is in Montreal now with more on what happened today with these so-called compassion clubs. Geneviève, what are these clubs set up to do?
Well, they're actually supposed to supply people who need marijuana for legal medicinal purposes. And so what happens is that these people usually are volunteers. They work at the Compassion Club and they provide this service to people who come in with perhaps a doctor's note or some sort of paper identification suggesting that they would need this marijuana for medicinal purposes. But essentially what people in the neighborhood of this one particular Compassion Club, which is the one that is sort of, police say, started this whole investigation going. People there were saying that, you know, neighbors were complaining there was increased traffic since the club started just a few months ago, that there had been a lot of activity in the neighborhood, and they were suggesting to police that perhaps not everyone who was going there looked sick in any way, so they thought there was some suspicious activity going on there, and that's why they called police.
I have to confess, I've never heard of these compassion clubs. How common are these things? Are they just in Quebec?
No, they're not. There are some in several provinces in Canada, and you know they have been around for quite a few years. The first one in Canada opened more than 10 years ago. Now, of course, they do exist in a bit of a legal gray zone to a certain extent. It's not as though police didn't know that these clubs existed in the past. There's one that's been open in Montreal itself for 10 years, but of course, you know, Health Canada has allowed the use of marijuana for medicinal purposes since 2001, and so that marijuana has to be gotten somewhere. And what Health Canada says is that the government is the only entity that is allowed to distribute any of this legal marijuana. And of course, though, you know, it's not necessarily always obvious to get. There are some provisions within the law which allow for people to grow marijuana for their own medicinal purposes or designate somebody. But Health Canada does say that it does not recognize these compassion clubs as being, you know, as having the right to distribute, to sell marijuana to these people. But, you know, police, when we asked that today, you know, how come they've been operating for so long and nothing's been done in the past? Well, of course, you know, as I say, they were perhaps operating in a bit of a legal gray zone, and police were perhaps looking the other way to a certain extent, looking at it as though they're well, actually, until they got these complaints. And I should say also that what police were saying is that they were targeting the people who were distributing the marijuana to people today, not the people who were going in there to get their marijuana with their paperwork, with the doctor's note, those people who were sick. Really, the people who were distributing it were the people, the 25 people they were looking at to arrest today.
Yeah. What do you think these raids mean now for the future of these clubs?
Well, and that's the question. There have been other raids. You know, in April, there were raids in Ontario on 2 compassion clubs there also. And so what's going to happen now is that there'll be a closer look at what is happening now and whether, you know, there was a case a few years back, and it was quite a few years ago, where the judge, it was a Quebec compassion club that was raided. A person who was running it was arrested, and the charges were stayed after the judge said that, well, if we allow people to have access to medicinal marijuana, we have to get them a way to get access to that medicinal marijuana. So where do they go to get them? And that's the question now. These people, you know, we talked to some people who were members of the club here in Montreal, and they said, you know, where will we go now? I guess we'll have to go back to the street where we got it before. So, you know, there'll be a closer look for sure that will be taken at these clubs and you know, through the courts as well.
Yeah, interesting issue. CTV's Geneviève Boschman speaking with us from Montreal this evening. Thanks very much.
Goodbye.